Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. Whispers from the Downs. The Isle of Wight had always been a place of quiet charm for Holly Arnold. A landscape of rolling hills, sleepy villages, and the omnipresent roar of the sea defined her childhood. But as she returned to the island for the first time in years, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the Downs of sprawling, misty hills had changed. Holly's visit to the Isle of Wight was meant to be a temporary escape. London had grown too suffocating, too loud, too crowded. The little stone cottage she rented on the edge of Ventnor was supposed to be her retreat. By day, she walked the familiar cliff paths and browsed the quaint shops. But at night, the whispers began. It started on her third evening. The mist had rolled in early, swallowing the Downs in a thick, silver haze. As she prepared for bed, she heard a faint voice, soft and melodic, drifting through her open window. She froze. The voice was indistinct, but it carried an undeniable familiarity. It wasn't just calling her name, it was beckoning her. Holly stepped onto the porch, peering into the swirling mist. The Downs loomed, shadowy and formless, as the voice called again. "Oh, Holly." She told herself it was the wind. But the pull was irresistible. Grabbing her coat and flashlight, she ventured into the foggy expanse of the Downs. The further Holly walked, the more surreal the world became. The mist thickened, turning her surroundings into an indistinct blur. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, and the ground beneath her feet grew soft and uneven. The voice guided her, always just out of reach. Finally, she reached a clearing. The mist parted slightly, revealing a circle of ancient stones. In the center was a hollow depression in the earth, a burial mound. Holly's breath caught as she saw faint traces of movement within the mound. A figure emerged. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but the shadowy form grew sharper. A woman stood before her, draped in tattered robes, her face obscured by a veil of hair. Her presence exuded an unnatural coldness. "You've come," the figure whispered. Holly asked, her voice trembling. The woman stepped closer. Her hair parted slightly, revealing hollow eye sockets that seemed to peer directly into Holly's soul. "We are the forgotten, bound to this place by the one who sought power." Holly took a step back, her instinct screaming at her to flee. But the woman's skeletal hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "It is your turn to join us." Holly awoke hours later. Dawn light bathed the Downs, dispelling the mist. For a moment she convinced herself it had all been a dream. But then she noticed her wrist. A jagged, dark mark encircled it, like a burned brand. She stumbled back to her cottage, her thoughts racing. The locals would know something. Someone would know the history of the Downs and the burial mound. The old man at the village pub eyed her warily as she described her experience. His face grew pale when she mentioned the mark. "You went to the Mound of the Lost. They say it's cursed. Centuries ago, a man sacrificed his entire village there for forbidden knowledge. Their souls were bound to the land." Holly felt the chill run down her spine. The old man hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Because the curse requires fresh blood. Every few decades, someone is drawn to the Downs. They vanish, leaving nothing behind but whispers in the mist." That night, she kept all the lights on and tried to drown out the silence with music. But the whispers returned. Holly. The air grew heavy, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Rejoin us." Terrified, Holly grabbed her coat and fled into the night, hoping to outrun the voices. But no matter where she went, the mist followed. It led her back to the burial ground. The stones seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The woman from the night before reappeared, her hollow eyes fixed on Holly. "You will finish what he started." Holly screamed as spectral hands emerged from the earth, pulling her into the mound. The last thing she saw was the figure's skeletal grin. Days later, Holly's cottage was found abandoned. The villagers whispered about the curse, about the poor soul claimed by the Downs. The whispers faded for a time, but the mist remained. And on certain nights, when the wind swept through the hills, a new voice could be heard. Ah! The villagers avoided the downs more than ever, their fear palpable. Some crossed themselves when the mist descended, others muttered prayers or clutched charms for protection. Yet none dared venture near the ancient burial ground, where the whispers seemed loudest. But the downs had a way of drawing people in. Tourists, ignorant of the island's darker tales, often wandered too far on their hikes. Occasionally, a lone traveler or a curious local would disappear without a trace, and the village would mourn in hushed tones, knowing the whispers had claimed another. Months passed, but Holly's presence lingered in subtle ways. Her friends and family, desperate for answers, searched tirelessly. They plastered her photo across the island, asking if anyone had seen the cheerful young woman who had come home for a break but never returned. One of Holly's closest friends, Emma, arrived on the Isle of Wight determined to find her. Emma had always been skeptical of ghost stories and curses, dismissing them as folklore. She scoffed at the warnings from the villagers and ventured into the downs herself, armed with a flashlight, a map, and an iron necklace she wore more for the villagers' peace of mind than her own. As Emma walked deeper into the mist, the air grew colder. The ground became uneven, the soft grass giving way to patches of exposed dirt and jagged roots. She called out Holly's name, her voice echoing in the fog. Then she heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible. Her heart leaped. She turned in the direction of the sound, scanning the haze for movement. Holly? The voice called again, more insistent this time. Emma followed it, her pace quickening as the whispers grew louder. But something about the voice wasn't quite right. It sounded distorted, stretched, as if it were being pulled through a great distance. Finally, she reached the burial ground. The ancient stones stood in their solemn circle, their surfaces etched with runes that seemed to writhe under her gaze. The air was deathly still. Emma whispered, stepping closer to the central mound. The earth shifted. Slowly, a figure began to emerge. It was Holly, or what was left of her. Her skin was ashen, her eyes sunken, and her once vibrant features were now gaunt and lifeless. She was draped in tattered mist, her arms outstretched toward Emma. Emma, Holly rasped. Emma's breath caught. Holly, what happened? What is this place? They trapped me here, Holly said. The curse binds us all. If you don't free me, there I'll be lost forever. Emma asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Before Holly could answer, the ground trembled violently. From the mound, other figures began to rise, shadowy, skeletal forms that radiated malice. The whispers turned into a cacophony of wails, drowning out Holly's voice. Holly screamed. But Emma stood her ground, clutching the iron necklace around her neck. She yanked it off and held it at the nearest figure. The iron glowed red-hot on contact, and the spectre shrieked before disintegrating into the mist. Taking a deep breath, Emma grabbed a nearby rock and smashed it against one of the standing stones. The runes flared angrily, and the wailing intensified. She continued her assault, tearing apart the ancient circle. With each stone that fell, the figures grew fainter, their forms dissolving into the air. Finally, as the last stone crumbled, a deafening silence fell over the downs. Holly's form flickered and began to fade, her expression one of sorrow and gratitude. Thank you. Emma collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked up, the mist was gone. The downs were bathed in the warm light of dawn, peaceful and quiet once more. Back in the village, Emma shared her story, but few believed her. The whispers ceased, and the downs lost their eerie allure. Over time, the burial ground became overgrown, its stones forgotten by all but the oldest villagers. But Emma knew better. The cost of breaking the curse had been high, and the weight of what she had seen would haunt her forever. And though the whispers were gone, she couldn't shake the feeling that the downs were watching, waiting for another chance to reclaim what had been taken. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.